Good morning and welcome back to the class. So we started with understanding the applications of biology for human welfare. We saw that biology indeed is something which is inseparable, a branch which has to be applied. In fact, that is the whole point of learning more about ourselves, right? So we said that we can use biology to maintain our health, and we started this chapter which is called as human health and disease. In this particular chapter, we started discussing what health is, what is immunity, what is exactly disease, what exactly is health, some kind of differences, how the disease comes, infectious diseases and non-infectious diseases. And then we started learning about some of the diseases which are caused by microorganisms or any other organisms. We started with the first disease. I guess we learned about the bacterial disease, which is the typhoid caused by the microorganism, a bacteria, which is called as the Salmonella typhi. Now we will be studying more about many such diseases in this particular class. I am sure you have heard of a disease which is called as pneumonia, right? Pneumonia is again a disease. This is caused by two microorganisms. Both of them are bacteria, and these two microorganisms are the very famous organism for all the medical experts, which is called as a Streptococcus pneumoniae. This is one organism which is being widely studied by various biologists, because this has got the ability to grow very slow, and many times you see them growing on the skin. And if it grows on the skin, you see that it does not cause any disease. But once it enters into our body, you see that it causes a disease which we call as pneumonia. Okay, there is one more microorganism which causes pneumonia, which is called as Haemophilus influenzae. Now these are the two microorganisms that cause pneumonia. You know what these do? When these two microorganisms, by one or the other means, enters into our lungs, they would go into our nasal cavity, they go into our trachea, they go into the bronchi, then they reach the alveoli. I'm sure you know what alveoli actually is. Alveoli are those small air-filled sacs in our lungs. Now, the pneumoniae organisms, the Streptococcus pneumoniae and Haemophilus influenzae, they both would go into the alveoli, go to the air-filled sacs, and would start growing there. They would start infecting, and this finally results in the alveoli having some kind of fluid. Now, whenever we have fluid, I'm sure you all have learnt about the physiological processes last year. You know how the blood exchanges its gases. Now, if there is a fluid in this alveoli or the air-filled sacs, then respiration becomes a problem. Right? So that way you see that the rate of respiration is very much affected because of the infection of Streptococcus pneumoniae or Haemophilus influenzae. Now, what do you think would happen when this infection happens? How do I get to know? What are the symptoms? Now, the symptoms of this is of fever. Now, this fever can be, sudden shooting fever with chills. Now, these symptoms seems to be quite common. But what is very important here is continuous, consistent cough, that associated with headache. Now these are the symptoms which are kind of helpful to diagnose the infection of pneumonia. Many times you also see that the tip of these fingernails that we have, they become kind of light gray or bluish in color. It's not only the fingernails, it's sometimes the tip of our fingers, the lips, then we have the toes. All this changes its color to kind of grayish or bluish in color, and that is also one symptom for pneumonia. Okay, now how do these microorganisms enter into our body? Now that organism is spread by 2 to 3 ways. The first one is by air. Suppose a person who is infected coughs, then certain droplets or aerosols are released by this infected person, and all these droplets or aerosols, they all, if they are breathed inside by a healthy person, he would get those diseases. So that is one big problem. Okay, and that controlling is slightly difficult because aerosols and such droplets are kind of quite common in the place where the surrounding places of the patient. The second way of spreading is by sharing their glasses or utensils or their clothes, their handkerchiefs and so on. That also causes the spread of this particular organism. Okay, so these are the bacterial diseases which are kind of quite scary, but frankly speaking, these are not untreatable. They're all treatable. But please don't think that these are the only 2 diseases caused by the bacteria. There are many other diseases like dysentery, then we have plague, then diphtheria, many others, all this which are caused by the bacterial infections itself. Right? So the second disease that is the bacterial disease. Now the next one is about some of the viral disease. Okay, the viruses are those peculiar creatures. I call them as peculiar creatures because I still do not know if I really have to call them as a creature. So these are so tiny, they can enter into our body through air, water or touch, and they enter into our body, infect our cells, kill our cells, and they keep growing in number. And when they kill, there are so many small viruses that would be released, which again infect all the healthy cells in our body, and this way their number increases maximally. Now the most common disease that you would have seen is the common cold. Now this is a viral disease. Common cold is a viral disease. This is so common that we still do not have a vaccine to this. It's because this organism that causes this common cold has such a ability to change itself, quite easily mutate, quite easily adapt, quite easily undergo modification, and hence you have no vaccine to this common cold. This organism, this virus, infects nose and the respiratory passages. Generally, you see that it does not go to the lungs, it's only to the upper respiratory tract that gets infected. Sometimes it goes up to the bronchi, but not to the lung chambers and the alveoli. Okay, so what would happen when there is a common cold? We know very well that there is a nasal congestion, and there is also discharge. Many times you see that the throat gets infected, we have a sore throat, we cannot talk well, our voice becomes hoarse. Then most of the times cold is associated with cough, then we have headache and tiredness, lethargic, and all this will be lasting for 3 to 7 days. In our language we have one quote which tells that, if you take the medicine for cold, it goes away in 7 days. If you don't take medicine, it goes in a week. So that way, whether you take the medicine or not, you generally see that this will last for around 7 days. Now, how does this particular virus spread? Now, this spreads mainly from the droplets. Okay, a person who coughs or sneezes or contaminated objects like pens or kerchiefs and such things, they will always have some virions or the viruses which are ready to attack the other cells. They are all there in that aerosols and in this substance which they touch, and you see that this causes infection to a healthy person. So that is one more viral disease. See, these two are bacteria and viruses. Both of them are considered to be microorganisms, but not always it's caused only by microorganisms. There are some protozoans again which are microorganisms only, they are quite small. Now, protozoans also cause certain diseases. I'm sure you would have heard of a disease called malaria. Have you heard of this? Malaria, mosquito comes? Yes, malaria is actually not caused by mosquito. That's wrong. Malaria is caused by a protozoan which is called as Plasmodium. Okay, and in this we have different species. We have Plasmodium vivax, Plasmodium malariae, Plasmodium falciparum, and so on. So what exactly this is the role of mosquito here? You see that this Plasmodium is a protozoan, and for this Plasmodium to complete its life cycle, we can say, it requires two organisms. One is a mosquito and the other one is human beings. Okay, and that is the reason why mosquito is not the causative organism. Mosquito is just acts like a carrier. Okay, so we have different species of Plasmodium. We have Plasmodium vivax, Plasmodium falciparum, then we have Plasmodium malariae, and so on. We see that Plasmodium falciparum is very dangerous. It is fatal. So what exactly happens with respect to this mosquitoes? Okay, mosquito and the humans. Let us see how this particular thing works. Okay, now we will start off with a mosquito, and this mosquito injects, it kind of takes blood, right? So when it injects, it releases certain parasites into the human system. Okay, it releases something into the human system. Now what does it release? Now it releases some small parasites which we call as the sporozoites. Okay, so in the mosquitoes there are sporozoites, and these sporozoites are released when a mosquito bites. Okay, now this sporozoites goes into the bloodstream. They are going directly into the liver. Okay, so the sporozoites, they go into the liver of the humans. It goes into the liver of the humans. Now inside the human's liver, what do you think would happen? Now there inside the liver, I will do one thing, I'll just take this out. So inside the liver, this sporozoites would reproduce. And how do they reproduce? They reproduce asexually. So there is asexual reproduction, and then what you see is this asexual reproduction releases the spores, again this microorganisms, this protozoans, into the bloodstream. Okay, so there asexual reproduction happens and these are released into the bloodstream. Now then what would happen? Then this small spores which gave rise to the asexual reproduction, right? There are the small plasmodial cells. Now they go into the bloodstream. Okay, they go into the bloodstream. Now in the bloodstream you see that there is again infection. The cells which are released into the blood, they enter into the blood cell. There they go into the blood cells. I would write it as infection of RBC. And once it goes inside the RBC, you see that the RBC gets lysed. There is some more reproduction happening here. Again, it's all asexual reproduction. And then this leads to the lysis of the red blood cells. Okay, now comes one more stage here. After it goes to the red blood cells, in the red blood cells there are some kind of cell division where there is some kind of sexual stages that you would see, and all this happens in RBC. So there are some asexual reproduction leading to some release of cells. Now in the process what would happen is the RBCs would develop into two types of these cells, which we call as the male and the female gametocytes. Male and the female gametocytes. So there are so many gametocytes that would be released here under this condition. So this is one phase that would happen inside the human body. Now when a mosquito bites, when a mosquito bites, it is taking the blood, right? It is sucking the blood. Now it would suck all these gametocytes. Okay, it would check, it would suck all this gametocytes, or it would take the blood which has the gametocytes, and so these gametocytes again enters into a mosquito through its bite. Now there, as soon as it goes inside the mosquito, you see that there is fertilization of these gametocytes. There is fertilization of the gametocytes, and there this fertilization, let me say, it happens in intestine of mosquito. It happens inside the mosquito, and after it develops into after it fertilizes, you see it starts developing, and then this finally gives rise to the sporozoites. This finally gives rise to the sporozoites, and these sporozoites will come out of the intestine, come to the salivary glands, and comes into the mosquito mouth, and when it bites, it gets back again into the humans. So you see that for the completion of the life cycle of Plasmodium, it requires two hosts. One is human, the other one is a mosquito. So the mosquito bites humans, releases sporozoites. These sporozoites go to the liver, asexual reproduction happens, releases small plasmodial cells. These plasmodial cells go to the bloodstream, infect RBCs. There they undergo increase in their number by asexual reproduction. Some of them would undergo sexual stages also, sexual reproduction also, where there is formation of a male and a female gametocyte, and this male and the female gametocyte again enters into the mosquito when a mosquito bites, and then causes there it undergoes in the intestine fertilization, which develops into sporozoites, which again comes back to humans. So this way you see, mosquito is basically like a carrier, and maybe I think mosquito would be thinking that humans are carriers, if at all it has the ability to think, right? Now what exactly is the problem if this microorganism just keeps growing in our body and the mosquito takes it, right? Now it is not just the increase in their number, but there are many things that is associated with the infection of these sporozoites. The first one is that many liver cells gets damaged. Many liver cells gets damaged because whenever the cells are undergoing some kind of production, the cells just get lysed up. Similarly, RBCs also rupture. RBCs also get sliced. Okay. Now, when RBCs gets lysed, there is the release of one toxic substance, and that toxic substance is what we call as hemozoin. It is called as hemozoin. Okay. Now, this hemozoin is something that is very, very toxic substance. Our body spends a lot of energy to maintain its body temperature, right? Now this is a toxic substance which kind of disrupts with those metabolic pathways, and because of the rupture of RBCs, there is chill and very high fever and chill that is occurring 3 to 4 days. Sometimes it occurs every 3 to 4 days. When it is in liver, no chills are seen, but when they come to the RBCs and there is reproduction and rupture of the RBCs, that is when we see the release of hemozoin, and that is quite dangerous. Okay, so that is the problem there. Then the mosquito which is involved in all this is a mosquito which is called as the Anopheles mosquito, which is called as and only the females bite the humans here. So we have a female Anopheles mosquito. It goes inside and comes out, and you see that this is basically a very special organism because it requires two organisms completely of different nature to complete its life cycle. So that itself is something that is very different. Also, you should know that this female Anopheles mosquito is considered to be a vector, it is considered to be a transmitting agent, and also the carrier of the disease, which is malaria. So this is what is malaria and all about, and how this malaria infects human beings. I just want you to do one very simple kind of Google, which is, you should know why no other phases of or other species of mosquito cause this disease. Why only female Anopheles mosquito causes this disease, why not others? Okay, maybe you can think and we can discuss about this in our class, live class. Okay, so this is one disease which is caused by protozoan. There is one more disease caused by a protozoan. One more disease which is caused by a protozoan, which is called as amoebiasis. Heard of it? Amoebiasis is a protozoan disease which is caused by an organism called as Entamoeba histolytica. It's called as Entamoeba histolytica. Now this is very commonly called as amoebic dysentery. Generally, this organism, which is called as the Entamoeba histolytica, would go and infect the large intestine. Now, when it infects the large intestine, you know the role of large intestine, it is to absorb water, and then it also produces certain vitamins. Then you see that the entire gut's, I would say, health is dependent on large intestine's work, because this is the one which kind of is very much important to cause hunger, then throw out the waste, and so on. Now, because of this infection of Entamoeba histolytica, this induces constipation. Now, because of constipation, because there is no proper bowel movement, there is also abdominal pain and cramps associated with this. Now, suppose this gets kind of treated by taking a laxative, you see there might be stools with lots of mucus and blood clots. So this is treatable, it's not fatal, but only problem is the release of this pores from the large intestine is something that has to be very much complete and efficient. Okay, if there are spores present, then it is not very good, because this particular amoebiasis keeps on happening and not a very good sign at all. And over a period of time, if this goes unnoticed and untreated, we see that the person would lose his appetite and also lose his absorption ability, and there would be a lot of vitamin deficiencies as well. So how does this particular organism, Entamoeba histolytica, enter into our body? Now again, for the spread of this particular organism, we have houseflies. Houseflies, they act as mechanical carriers. They take the mechanical carriers. They take this organism. They transfer the organism parasite from the feces to the infected person through food or food products. It contaminates them, and generally this is spread by taking non-hygienic food. Okay, non-hygienic food, the food if it is not covered, and so on. So that's the main source of infection. So presence of fecal matter in our food. So that is one more disease which is called as the amoebiasis. Now we have few more diseases, like have you heard of a disease called ascariasis? Have you heard of this disease called as ascariasis? Now this is caused by a roundworm. Okay, ascariasis is caused by a roundworm which is called as ascaris. So this is not a protozoan, but this is more like a filarial worm and some helminths. Okay, so these are intestinal parasites. Ascariasis is caused by ascaris, happens when the ascaris goes into our intestine. So what would happen if there is ascaris in our intestine? It causes certain discomfort. First one is something which we can feel, called as the muscular pain, especially the stomach pain. Okay, associated with fever, then we have anemia, and sometimes you also see internal bleeding. Now these are the three most important symptoms for finding out when and whether there is ascariasis infection. So what would happen is, a person who is infected would excrete even the eggs of the parasite, and this eggs of the parasite would get into the soil or would get into the water or the plants. And when a healthy person eats this vegetables or the fruits or drinks water which has this particular egg present, even in the soil, it can survive for quite a long time, it would cause infection. It would cause this particular infection, which is called as the ascariasis. We have treatment for ascariasis, but the problem is with diagnosis. Diagnosis takes a long time because ascariasis symptom is that anemia and muscular pain. Now muscular pain is one of them which is very, very important. The exact location of where the infection has happened is something that is very important here. And also the intestinal passage gets blocked, and that is also one very important symptom of ascariasis. Now just like this ascariasis as a helminth infecting us, there is one more which is called as an organism which is called as Wuchereria. Heard of it? Now this is actually called as a filarial worm. It's basically a very, very small worm. It's small worm which cause a chronic inflammation of the organs. Okay, this organism enters into our body. If it enters, you see that it's not going to show all the symptoms suddenly, but it takes a very, very long time, and the long time goes for many years. Okay, so which parts of the body does this affect? We see that this Wuchereria infects our limbs, generally our legs or generally our hands, and certain lymphatic vessels of limbs, or sometimes you also see that it infects the genital organs, or sometimes we also see that it would infect some digestive parts like the rectum and the anus. So in such regions, this particular organism which is called as a Wuchereria, a filarial worm, infects. And because of the infection, you see it grows very slowly, and slowly it's a chronic inflammation, and very slowly infects the lymphatic vessels, because of which there is a huge inflammation. Okay, and this results in a person who is infected having a huge leg or huge hands or huge genitalia and so on. In fact, this disease, hence we call it as elephantiasis. It's called as elephantiasis. We also call this as filariasis. Both mean the same, where the lymphatic vessels get infected. Okay, and this is some deformities which is really not so good to see at all. And all these diseases are spread from one person to other only by the mosquito bite. A female mosquito bite. So mosquito bite is a carrier, mosquito bite is a vector. So we have the next disease, which is the elephantiasis caused by Wuchereria. So this is one more helminth that causes disease. Now after talking about all these types of organisms, I think we should not forget the diseases caused by fungi. Okay, so we have various fungi that causes diseases. Very importantly, we have something that we call as trichophyton, the group of fungi which we call as the trichophyton. Then we have something which we call as microsporum. So these are those small fungi which would infect our skins, okay, on the skin surface. And you know, our skin is again very unique. It has enough moisture and enough oil, and this fungi would love such kind of environment. Okay, so this infects the skin and starts growing on the skin. And once it starts growing, you see that our skin becomes quite dry. There are some kind of white patches or scaly lesions that we see on the skin. Sometimes not only skin, it infects our scalp, it infects our nails, again our external genitalia, and all this infections would be very discomforting. Okay, that is mainly because whenever there is this kind of infection, it causes itching. Okay, and when you start kind of taking the itch out, you see that it can spread also. Okay, you are helping the fungi to spread, and thus it grows on the skin quite easily. And you know how this gets spread from one person to the other person? It is not by mosquito, it is by not maintaining the personal hygiene. So if the person does not use a good towel, or uses a towel used by someone else, or using a comb, or even a nail cutter, all this would, or sharing clothes, all this would help in the spread of these ringworms. Frankly speaking, these fungal infections are something which are very, very difficult to be treated. That is because how much ever care you take, you see that this kind of comes back quite often. It kind of comes back quite often, and you have to be extremely careful about maintaining a very, very good hygiene. Okay, so talking about certain skin infections by fungi belonging to trichophyton and microsporum. So we have seen so many diseases right now, and you see, of all these diseases, most of them, 90 to 95% of them, they are all caused by our negligence only. I was telling you, right? If you can prevent the disease, that is the best way to have a good health. So if you have a very good personal hygiene, this kind of infections do not happen. If you maintain a public hygiene, all these diseases can be prevented. Right? So you have to see that you give lot of importance to hygiene, keep your body clean, and then you drink clean water, good food, vegetables, have good immune system, so eat well. We'll be talking more about this a little later. Okay, if at all you have you stay in a rural area, you have to see that the waste, the excreta is very far from a drinking area or a region where we grow vegetables and fruits. So there has to be proper cleaning, periodic cleaning, disinfection of water reservoirs where we have water tanks and all that. And if you keep doing all this, you see most of the diseases that we have discussed, like the typhoid, the pneumonia, the ascariasis, all this can be prevented. Now talking about airborne diseases like common cold and even pneumonia, this also has to be kind of very easily controlled. they are easily controllable. You know, if you maintain your personal hygiene, to see that you do not generally touch your face all the time, or you have your hands most of the time clean, keep washing most of the times, then before eating, after eating, use good hand washes. All these are really good. Okay, and not only all this, the first and foremost thing that we in our developing country we have to think of is controlling the vectors. So if I have the ability to control house flies and mosquitoes, many other diseases can be kind of controlled. Yes or no? It is, because you don't have mosquitoes, you don't see that their life cycle is complete, and therefore you can stay healthy, right? So you see that you have to stop the breeding places for house flies and the mosquitoes. And how can you do that? I'm sure you people know about it very well. So there should be no stagnation of water, no water that stays. Then you introduce a small fishes which is called as gambusia. Heard of it? The small fishes called as gambusia, put it in the waters. They feed on the mosquito larvae, and that way you can see that your mosquitoes would be killed. Also, right now I don't know if I can tell you in the class here of using DDT. Okay, how good is using DDT? Is it good? Is it bad? We are still not very sure of that, because most of them are already DDT resistant, and we have also seen that DDT infects us. So any pesticide that we are using, it is not that safe for us itself. At the same time, going through controlling this population by a natural method by using gambusia fishes, they are much preferable. Okay, and right now you'll be studying later in the next unit about biotechnology. So using biotechnology, what we can do, we can kind of have certain mosquitoes which kind of eat other mosquitoes, or maybe we have some kind of vaccines which kind of prevent various diseases like pneumonia and tetanus, or we have that smallpox and all many other diseases, all these which are all cured by the use of biotechnology. So this way you see that the entire set of these diseases are controllable. Just to give you an idea of one of the chapters that we concluded in the last class, we spoke about evolution. So you use DDT, a mosquito develops resistance to DDT, so it is evolving. Okay, and we have realized that using DDT does not work anymore, so we will think of something else. So this way you see that all the organisms, whether it is a small virus or whether it is a organism which can use brain, humans, they are all continuously evolving, and we are all trying to kind of take the world forward. Okay, so since all the organisms have the responsibility, and there is a kind of a struggle for existence, the complete food chain and the food web has to be maintained. We have a very big role. Okay, and all this is possible only when you appreciate and learn and apply what you've studied in the field of biology. Okay, so this is all about the various diseases, their infections and their symptoms. So you should know all these organisms and their symptoms. So I have written it down on the board, make a note of it. Symptoms are also very important, but most of the symptoms I'm sure you would be knowing. Organisms is something which we tend to forget, so better make a note of it. So I hope you do not have any doubts. Any doubts, make a note. We will discuss in our live class. In our next class, we will talk more about immunity, types of immunity, and their mode of function. Okay, see you in the next class. Till then, bye.